Lee, how are you?
Pretty good, thanks. And you?
It's been great. It's been some time. Last time I saw you was in Paris at the CDA Awards. Feels like, like a lifetime ago.
Well, hopefully we'll be there again this year.
I know. Did you have fun?
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was a really fun event. It was fantastic.
You were one of those guys that wear multiple hats, right? You're an architect, you're a designer, you design furnishing, you're also a curator, you write quite often as well.
Yeah, my
Um,
mother used to say I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none.
I don't know about that, but that's a good question. If you were to pick one of those things that you believe you're the better at, what would it be?
None of the above. I don't know. It's like, how do you pick your favorite kid? I don't know. I think they're all connected in a way. So you get to use your education. And I think the most important thing in whatever you endeavor is to combine um, emotion and intellect at the same time at whatever you address, and then you might have a chance of making something interesting. So whatever we get our hands on, I try to apply both of those disciplines to whatever we do.
All right, so let's break that down. How do you convey an emotional intellect?
Well, in the architecture work, for example, you have to identify a program and solve a problem. Uh, there's always, I would say, a problem like what normally connotes a problem. It's like there's a task to be had, there's something to solve, there's something to achieve. And once you get through the intellect of achieving that, how do you dig into yourself with your emotion, your heart, and feel something so that actually what you're doing transcends the problem and becomes an art form? And is a very complicated thing how you use both those pieces of yourself to take something to another place. And often the beauty of that is that with clients, for example, you both try to go to a place that neither of you could go on your own. And if you apply both those things, thinking and feeling, and not just think, because thinking can be just too dry, and not just feeling, it can be too sappy. If you can do the two, navigate the two simultaneously, there might be a chance to make something extraordinary. And that's the goal in each one of these endeavors, whatever discipline you choose to use.
See, I like what you said, that's the goal, but how often is that goal achievable? Because there are so many pushbacks in environments out of your control to make sure that you can at least convey, what you just mentioned, a combination between solving the problem, but also with an emotional touch.
Great works of art do that. I can't. I try to achieve that. We try to achieve it. I mean, it's an attempt. I don't know if anybody knows if they ever achieve it, but as a goal, it's certainly a very aspirational goal. And you know it, you feel it, you think it. I think when it satisfies both of those components of yourself, something that you learn and something that you feel, then maybe it's done something that's unusual and meaningful. And that's the attempt. Whether you get it, I don't know. I'd like to think we are able to do it on projects, but it's certainly the goal. I can't judge if we've done it. We try to do it, and that's kind
Mhm.
of every endeavor we do, whether it's taking a picture, designing a product, designing a building, curating a show. You try to ask questions, which only lead to more questions because there are never any answers. But hopefully, those become more profound, and you feel like you've gone someplace. And that's the intent in everything we try to do.
Do you ever draw a line? Because as you mentioned, the goal and the intent is pretty clear, but perhaps not every single project will be able to perhaps achieve that level that you really wanted to achieve, or there's deadlines, there's other things that you have to convey. At what point that you decided that it's time to let it go?
You never give up. You never let it go. That's what gets us into trouble. Never letting go.
Give me an example.
Well, I could take it to each and every one of the disciplines we work on. If we're working on a project, say it's a new construction, we completed the construction documents. We're in the field. We're in construction, and we see something that isn't right. We will try to change it if it doesn't cause too much trouble. And if we can't change it, we try to make the existing situation better, but we're willing to look at it and assess and be very honest with ourselves and our owners or clients where it might be better. But we try to preempt that, though, by now, of course, with our wonderful staff and the advent of all the 3D programs we have, we try to see as much as we can, but it's never like what happens in the field. And even on the interiors portion, you do a beautiful plan, you'll have everything specified, and everything shows up, and it doesn't seem right. So then you're navigating to change it, and I'm always willing to change it and salvage it and make it better. And it always, by that thing of not giving up and hanging on to the very last minute, you have a chance. And sometimes we've done construction documents on projects, and we've looked at it when we've gotten all when we're compensated, and we say, I could be better there. We're willing at our own expense to go back to those documents and redo them. Because in the end of the day, it's the long haul that counts and not just the short task at that point. So as you build a body of work, you want to ask yourself, am I doing my best along the way? And it has nothing to do with the scale of a project. It can be a large project, a small project, but that's kind of the commitment you take as an architect and as an ethical architect to hold that responsibility of providing the best you can by thinking and feeling.
Is that a commitment that you always had since the early days of your practice, or something that perhaps you started treasuring a little bit more throughout the years and experience?
No, no, it was from the beginning because you're actually more idealistic in the beginning. But then again, I got even more idealistic as things, you feel more responsible as you go on. And it's one of the reasons it's not a profession to get in for financial reasons, because sometimes the creative process can work against time, and time is all you have. So when you're digging in for time, when time's up, we usually will take the time to make it right, or at least best attempt. I mean, we've changed things in the field. We've done products where we've made the prototypes and tossed them out and started over again. Um, whether it goes to everything we've done for waterworks. The late Peter Shelton, the wonderful partner here, we built all our own water faucets in here for waterworks. Invented new valves. We tinkered in the kitchen here. We went to a jeweler and soldered everything. We made them ourselves. And until they were right, we didn't submit them. But it was a long process when we were doing rugs for Sosky, one of which ended up in the Whitney High Style Show of American Design, the last object. We did it over and over and over again. Visosky was wonderful about doing rug making, doing samples over and over again until we got it right. And that struggle, we never expected to be included in the Best of American Design from 1888 to 1988. And they left one spot open, Lisa Phillips at the Whitney. We had no idea this was even going on, and we got a call that your rug has been selected to be the most contemporary, relevant object in 1988 in that show, and closed the show. But it was a long haul to get that 6x6 rug done. We never dreamed it would be there, but that was a cool thing. So I knew we did something. We tapped a moment, and it was a struggle. And we get involved in a lot of competitions where we do that. We lose sometimes. But I never feel as though losing isn't learning something. So you'll be in a competition with your peers. You'll do a project. You might not get it, but you've given it everything, and it only helps you develop and move on to the next thing. So I don't view not getting something as not gaining something. And so even along the path of a lot of uh, things where you may get rejected and a lot of things where you get accepted, I don't view a rejection as a rejection of your principles. It's a development of your ideas. So you try to think of the long haul and how each of these experiences that is actually a privilege to get to be creative. And creativity is the thing that differentiates us from most other species, I think. And that's what we live for, is that idea of combining what you think and what you feel.
It's a privilege to be creative. I like that one.
Mm. And also, I would say this: it's a privilege as an American because we are a political democracy, which also makes us a design democracy. When you think about that, because in this country where we embrace all cultures, it's not homogeneous. So we can freely associate from the things that make this country great, which is this cornucopia of beautiful. I mean, our office is is like the United Nations here. We have people from Pakistan, India, Brazil, Greece, um, Spain, Korea, and that tapestry is what makes America this incredible place. So as thinkers, we are able to draw on that as well. I remember um, I've done a lot of work with history, and I was curating a exhibition in London about Nordic design, and I had the privilege of having Hannah Kirholm, Paul Kirholm's widow, visit me in New York because we had been specifying Kirholm since the beginning of our career, and he was relatively unknown. So she came to my loft and she started crying. Now Danes are pretty tough; they don't cry so easily. And I said, Hannah, what is it that she says? Well, I've never seen anything like this. There's my husband, late husband's work and my work. And I said, yes. And I thought, as Americans, we have the ability to bring everybody into a conversation. So there's your husband's work, and there's Le Corbusier's work, and there's Mies van der Rohe's work, and there's Gio Ponti's work, there's Alba Otter's work. And we as Americans have a conversation that is what America's about, is embracing all cultures. Whereas in your Denmark, it's very homogeneous, and you've never really seen that celebration of all these wonderful groups together, and that's a uniquely American opportunity. So I realized how lucky we were as Americans to be able to draw on all these, having traveled in so many places and written and photographed. I had a column called The Architect's Eye also, in which I would photograph places and write about them, because I feel like I'm a perpetual student. And every time I go to a place, I want to learn something. So I thought if I could capture that. So it was only when she came to see me and was startled, which I took for granted, that I realized how lucky we are as Americans to be able to freely associate and embrace all those cultures, which really does not happen anywhere else in the world.
So, kind of going back to this idea that the American design is a democratic one that you just shared, I think it's quite fascinating. But the interesting thing, and I want to hear your thoughts on how you navigating the fine line between cultural appreciation and appropriation in your design.
Never copy, just be informed. I mean, Picasso said if he didn't learn the classics, he could never make abstraction. So, not interested in literal reproduction, uh, but interested in learning from history and the lessons it learns. Because usually, movements or things that happen are the result of socio-political things going on in various parts of the world. There are reasons that things look or act the way they do because they're a response to what's happening. So you try to be responsive to what's going on in what's appropriate. And technology brings a lot into that. How do you stay modern but stay informed and not abandon the past is a challenge. So we navigated that line, and our work is consistent. I can look at work we've done 35 years ago; it doesn't look weird, but it also felt appropriate then. Hopefully, it doesn't feel like an anachronism now, by trying to find the truth and rigor in every project. Because if you tell the truth and you have rigor and you solve a problem, even though it might be a new vocabulary for you, the rigor and honesty will make it become something classic. So when people say design something classic, it's not necessarily to go back. It's how to be appropriate, go forward and tell the truth. And that if you tell the truth, it has the possibility of becoming a classic in the future.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think the way you explain makes complete sense. And it's pretty clear for us who are listening and watching how your thought process when it comes to this matter. Now, you said about being educated, being informed, and never copying, and take, be brave with your choices. How often the environment allow you to do that? We are in an industry who is very commercialized, the industry that follow a lot of trends.
I put that aside. That's like the dog ate my homework. I don't, we don't really think about that. Stay focused. Stay on that, solving that problem and finding a creative way with the responsibility of knowing what your financial constraints are in terms of budget, knowing the context you're in, understanding the person you're working for. Those are all things that are baked into your thinking. They aren't things that inhibit you. They're things that help you. The more constraints you have, the more creative you can become. So I view those challenges as an opportunity to do something better rather than to do something not so wonderful. In fact, um, the tougher the project, the bigger the challenge, the bigger the possibility to make something extraordinary. And that's the challenge on each project. What are those parameters? How do you imbue them into your psyche and move forward, given that that is all freely associated in your head, and you mix that together as a kind of premise by which you approach the problem. It's not something that inhibits you; it's something that helps you.
Would you agree that the perimeters and the problems, the limitations, which the context that you have to work from, is almost an incentivation for creativity? That sometimes because there exists the opportunity to create something different, more innovative, is kind of comes along with that perspective.
Well, we've never had a project where somebody says "do me" ever. We've always had complex projects, um, structurally, financially, time wise. But each of those things, you have to really dig in, as I was saying before, and solve that problem. And because of those components in it, you'll have a very individual solution for each project, not one that is just every project is the same. The constraints make opportunities.
What keep you up at night?
Everything. I don't sleep a lot. What happened is I don't know. I just the work and my responsibilities are with me all the time. So I often, I mean, almost every night, I wake up at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and some projects in my head, and I'm thinking, what could happen there, or we're have to come up with a new premise for an exhibition. I don't know. It's sometimes in the middle of sleep, or hopefully sleep, that your mind is somewhat cleared itself, and then in that clarity, you sort of jump up and realize I've cleared the I've cleared a little bit, and now maybe I can think a little more, because people don't realize the amount of to do these tasks requires a lot of thinking time. We're not vending machines where you put in a quarter and you get an answer. It takes a long time in mulling and looking and thinking and coming back and not being afraid to re-examine your thoughts. And so I would say my responsibilities for the people in the office keep me up. My commitment to my clients make me think a lot, and hopefully making better work. That's what I think about.
How do you avoid to be in a state of getting burned out? Do you ever get in that state that you're just too overwhelmed, there's too much going on that you need to, take a break?
Well, I'm always burned out, but I'm always have more energy. So I don't know. I'm like the ever ready buddy, whatever that was, the battery. You can't get burned out because we're lucky to get to do what we do, and to be in a creative field is a gift in itself. So every time you think that I'm overwhelmed, which can happen a lot, you have to kind of step back and say, but I'm doing something by choice. I'm not doing something by force. And to be able in this country to do something by choice is the gift of architecture and design and creativity. And sometimes you have to do things that to keep things going that may not seem as though they're as rewarding. But then when you get them done and you look back, you say, my gosh, during COVID, I got through all that. That was really miserable at the time. I was overwhelmed with people dying all around in the city and running around in a car with a computer a Xerox machine in the back of the trunk, and visiting sites from people, and no one working in the office and people getting sick. We still did 3 projects, and I was overwhelmed. But then again, we made it through it. We all survived. We moved. We opened up the gallery. Um, we did a lot of things that at the time I was overwhelmed by, but having gotten through them, I'm so glad we persisted. And it's about the work ethic. The work ethic is unique, and working is rewarding.
You have talked quite a bit about the commitment, but also being in a privileged position, and also, what in your opinion, what are some of the benefits, if there is any, to be an architect based in the United States, an American-based architect compared to anywhere else in the world?
Well, there are a lot of wonderful architects that do international work, so I wouldn't limit it, to just an American art. I think being an architect is a privilege now. Being an American architect is an extra privilege because of the amount of work in this country. I think I understand there are more opportunities here than there are in the European countries, particularly for a lot of the kinds of things we do. But I've had the good fortune to work with uh, Norman Foster's office, with John Revelle and Herzog and Moran. We collaborate, and so I've learned a lot from those people. They're incredible, and they have somehow reached out from their provincial areas into a big world. And that's the wonderful thing about architecture. You can reach out into a big world. But as an American, there is a lot of opportunity here. Those wonderful architects have reached beyond their provinces, but in America, there's a lot of opportunity.
Can you
Work with Richard Meyer, um, uh, Peter Bolin, Peter Rose, some really great people we've learned so much from. And that's been the joy, too, to work with people you respect, collaborate with them, learn from the masters, as it were. And they teach us so much.
You are also a student of the history of design and architecture, as you know so much and has written about it quite often. When you look into the scope of the last 100 years of the industry and what you see right now, because you're also very involved and very present in what's going on today, you speak quite often in schools and in panels and so on. Do you see a bigger disconnect from what, let's say, the golden age, some of the people that you mentioned before? They established themselves as iconic architects and designers to this generation they're taking on, or very much aligned?
Well, people often look back with nostalgia and think that work isn't being done like work was being done in the past. And it isn't, but it doesn't mean it's not exciting and great and will be the next iconic thing. So I don't view the past as a frozen thing, but the past is a continuum. But, having been exposed and taught by Lou Kahn and exposed to Alto and Le Corbusier and Richard Meyer and Colin Rowe and Gerhard Kalman McKinnell, and Moshe Safdie, and uh, I mean, the great architects that I respect, and having been taught by them, uh, there are people coming up through the ranks that have been part of that continuum that will bring that knowledge, like Picasso did with his painting, forward and become iconic as we move forward.
Now, I can't, nowadays, it feels like I cannot go through any conversation that AI is not some sort of a topic, right? So here we are again. And I want to ask your point of view on that. Often enough, people just tell me it's a tool. Use it if you, the way you want it or not. But do you think the role of an architect is being diminishing? Could we be approaching a point where human creativity, in architecture at least, is more, combination of art and, of course, right and left brain kind of situation, is less value because of that?
Um, no, because if you look at the history of communications, when first you had script was written, and then you look at uh, writing on paper, and then you look at typing, and then you look at texting, and you look at computers. Each of those things did not. undermine literature, undermine poetry, or undermine theater, or undermine meaning. So we have to look at, and not to be cliche, tools only help you reach inside you to create something human. So despite all the technology around us, the humanity has to still be the main component that brings us forward.
That's a great example, but could you also make the argument that because of the those technology you mentioned, we see perhaps less and less of poetry, we see less and less of good literature, perhaps, or other form?
I don't know, when people started to hear rap music, they didn't think it was music, and it's poetic music.
Mm.
So I would never put down any technology as replacing humanity. They're just ways we don't even know yet that we'll discover that will take us closer to something personal, despite what it superficially seems like something superficial.
I love it. I love it that you mentioned that like rap and hip hop is almost like a version of poetry, which it is, but is a modern to the time. You know, it's how it adapt to the time to still be present and still be relevant.
I mean, if you go back to Chaucer,
Mm.
he was rapping. Wander april with the shores of Suta. The drought of March have pressure to the ruta. Now that sounds like, it could be a rap thing, but that's Old English. So although it's a different thing, it's the same kind of thing. It has the same kind of cadence as Chaucer. So never underestimate the development of things reaching back to be something moving.
That's very interesting to think about it. How we're finding art through the streets in the world with the younger generation speaking itself in different language and yet still being able to communicate in an artistic form.
I mean, if you think of the musical, The Music Man, no one ever thought of it as a rap musical. But when you think of that opening scene in the train, or you got Trouble, My Friends in River City with a capital T and right with a P, and that says for pool, trouble, trouble. Nobody at that point thought that was rap, but that really is the early, and you go back to Chaucer, those poetry lines sound like rap. So it's just a different way of expressing yourself.
What kind of music do you listen? I mean, when you are home, perhaps not worrying too much about your responsibilities and what you have to do, and you have to play something. What do you usually to go musician
I
playlists?
like I like all kinds of music. I mean, last night I went to see Once Upon a Mattress with Sutton Foster, and tonight I'm going to see the rap version of Cats at Perlman. They've turned it into not about cats, but in about the ballroom culture. And I love classical music and Leonard Bernstein. I know the Bernstein family. I know a lot of people in music. I've also worked for Sting. I love his music, and jazz is probably my favorite thing to listen to.
Yeah.
Used to follow Nina Simone around the world. When I went to Harvard, they had a concert. I'd never heard of her, Nina Simone, before at Sanders Theater, and I thought this is an extraordinary work. So I made it my business to see her wherever she appeared, and she had emotion and intellect in everything she did. So I became very interested in her work.
Do you have other people like Nina Simone's that you really resonate often? Artists, architects, or designers, or in different industries, or filmmakers, Broadway producers, or so on. That for you, they've been able to define themselves and become the epitome of their craft.
You know, I mean, I don't want to sound like name dropping, but I was never obsequious. But the things that I was interested in, somehow, sooner or later, I had the opportunity of meeting those people that I admired that were role models to me that I never could have imagined meeting, getting to know, or even work for. So um, I'm not going to believe this. When I was 5 years old, my parents were active, as we were in a little town. It was kind of a dumpy town called Highland Park, New Jersey. Active in trying to plant the Negev in Israel. So there was this movement to buy trees in all of the towns, and my father was the chairman of the local Israel bond drive. And what was remarkable to me as a 5 year old, we had Eleanor Roosevelt as a house guest. And I couldn't believe, even at that age, what a profound effect that would have on me. And I remember we were in this limousine going to the event, and there were sirens going off in front of us in a motorcade. And my mother said to Eleanor Roosevelt, Mrs. Roosevelt, this is the first time I've ever had the cops in front of me. And we chuckled and we had this wonderful experience. And I'll never forget that was like very early on. So I had a very high bar of those people and a succession of people that happened after that to me. I could share with you that they were all incredible and completely influenced my life. And they lived out that role model of the kind of artist or person that I wanted to be.
Well, they say that you should never meet your heroes, but seems like you have had a great experience in meeting at least most of them.
I've been really lucky. I mean, I can name 15 of them, where I could have never imagined knowing them or even they know my name and then becoming friends or work associates with them. It was just, I was always kind of dreaming and thinking, gosh, aren't they swell? And then somehow, I don't know, if you keep your eyes open and doors are open and you're not banging down the doors or letting it just open for you by keeping your eyes open, these opportunities happen. I mean, whether it was, you know, I mean, there's so many people in music and theater, art, design. I'm overwhelmed to think of those experiences I've had, which were really extraordinary.
Is your mom still with us?
No, I lost my parents a long time ago,
What was she like?
which is um, my parents were really hardworking, very cool. She was zany, super smart, super attractive, super stylish, tough, and a hard worker, and hilarious. And my dad was really special, super hard. They came from nothing. They got married very late because they didn't want to bring children into the world until they could afford to get to an education. So they were against type getting married very late, which is why I lost them very early. And you know, they taught me everything: how to care, how to love, how to work, how to be appreciative, uh, how to think. And I'm grateful for that. But always how to work.
Were they able to see you as an adult fulfilling your dreams and being an accomplished individual?
I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of regrets about them not living longer because I would have liked to have taken care of them as much as they took care of me, which is the normal thing in life. And I did the best I could, but you always think, gosh, I wish I were more present with them. I wish they were around. I wish I could do stuff, but that's part of overthinking things a little bit too.
Some of the things that might keep you up at night?
Sometimes a lot of nightmares. Yes.
uh, but what do you think, looking at you right now, the person that you are, you have become, what aspect of you do you think they would be most proud?
Um, Surviving and getting through struggles, getting through. I come from a generation of shame, uh, on which if you're a different religion, if you're in any way different, you have to be ashamed about it. And I'm trying to overcome that. I'm older than you, but you were meant to suppress anything that made you different, and you were supposed to conform. And I was different in so many ways, and I felt bad about that. When I went to boarding school at age 12, I had swastikas spray painted in my books, and I didn't know that anti-Semitism existed as a 12-year-old. So I didn't know how to cope with that. I thought, well, there must be something wrong with me if this is happening. And so I felt shame for that. Like, why is this happening? You don't have the emotional equipment at that age to understand that it's not you. And I had a series of experiences like that in which I sort of swallowed it all and just thought, I have to do better to compensate for feeling as though I'm different or weird and pass, as a kind of successful person. So it drove me to overfunction, to overcome the things I felt shame about. And luckily, there's still some of that today. But when I see a lot of the people in our office and people I know that weren't born in the '60s or the late '50s, they don't have that. They don't bring that forward. You know, and also coming through the whole AIDS generation, watching that whole thing was just brutal. So I'd say that getting past that, it's what drove me on the one hand, but it also made me very internalize a lot and feel loneliness and feel different. But then again, if you can get past that, which is the struggle one has always with oneself, their inhibitions or whatever, they're what made me have the ambition and the drive to overcompensate for those things that I was feeling different about.
When you walk around the office and you see all the people, all the projects, you go to the gallery, your clients, you visit the projects and all of that, do you have those pinching moments that perhaps you realize when you start your career that you never thought you would be in this position, or you just knew it when you started? This is where I'm heading.
I think I never think about my last audition, my last success or whatever. I always think of my next audition because it's not about the past. It's about sustaining it and moving forward. And I'm always nervous and worried we're not going to be able to. So I always feel like you can't rely on your past endeavors or accolades. You always have to audition. And you had mentioned the gallery. I don't know if you know how that thing happened, that story of that thing.
You have shared with me privately, but why don't you tell us here?
Yeah, well, um, I worked on 56 Leonard with Herzog and Moran, and I moved into that building. And during COVID, they're building the Anish Kapoor sculpture, which is like the Bean in Chicago. It was really delayed. And there was a raw, uh, kind of not even enclosed space at the base of the building in which they were constructing components of Anish Kapoor sculpture. And because of there was no floor, there was a street differentiator of 30 inches, like level, and there was nothing in the space. They couldn't rent or sell the space because it was being used for the construction of the sculpture, which was going on and on and on. So I know the development team, and they were kind of getting a little desperate because they were exiting their participation in the building and turning it over to the tenant shareholder. So I got a call one day, and, we have that space downstairs. We don't know what to do with it. We had people who could buy it, but the Anish Kapoor thing, we couldn't turn it over to them, and it needs to be fully constructed. Would you consider it? I said, nah, 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 nah. What do I need that thing for? I mean, we're in COVID now. My office, we just moved it. Nobody's coming into the office. There are ambulances everywhere. The city is in terrible shape. I can't take on a debt and even think about that. So then they came back and they said, would you do it for this? And I said, no, no, no. They came back with another offer, and I thought, wait a second. This is the darkest moments in New York that I've ever lived. I mean, except for 9/11. And maybe one should have hope. And at these times, believe in something. Take the chance to believe in New York. Believe that we will get through this despite how dark it is. And the interest rates were like 2.7%. And then they gave me some terms, and they said they would cover the expenses while the structure was being completed in there. And I thought, oh, I'm going to take a chance. So when nobody was out on the streets and nothing was happening, we had to close on a halal truck on 33rd and Park because no attorneys could go into buildings on the hood of a car. We closed, and then I thought, now what are we going to do with this thing? And then I've been working for as a volunteer for Design Miami, Design Paris, Design LA, Design Basel for 15 years, chairman vetting and awards, and I'm interested in history. And I thought, well, it wouldn't be a conflict of interest if we don't own things, but if we could create these selling exhibitions, almost like mini museums, and create a kind of 4 points, identifying the problem, and then reaching inside yourself to find the solution. Apply those principles to this space and create something that A, opened itself up to the neighborhood, B, embraced a world class sculpture, completed a building as it went to the ground, because often you see these spaces that don't understand the building, and having worked on the building, I felt a responsibility to complete the building. And then to, as Americans, again, to bring in from around the world different cultures and expose them and create these exhibitions in which you learn something. And so that was the idea, and it's all started during the darkest moments of COVID. So when you ask the question, what do you think about? I think about the future and not the past. And that was a moment where I thought about the future at the darkest moment. And it's still a challenge to do it, but we have a nice program coming up, and I'm very excited. We open up with a thing called Shadows and Light with crafted materials throughout the world of nature through Sarah Myerscough on September 5th, if anybody's around. And it will be on for 2 months. And then after that, we're going to deal with Swedish Grace about a period after World War One in the Nordic countries when classicism was reinvented. And then we'll do a thing with Sotstas after that with Friedman Benda and on, hopefully, moving forward.
Li-
That's a hobby. It's a hobby.
Well, it turned out to be a great hobby, keep you busy
Yeah.
and engaging in doing things that you love and you're excited about. Lee, before I let you go, three questions I ask everybody here on the show. We want you to recommend us a book, something to read, recommend us something to see. It could be a Broadway show, a movie, a TV show, a documentary, something that you think people should go check it out. And recommend us our next guest. Who should we invite next?
Hmm. Well, I like some really old fashioned books, more anthologies like Jansen's History of Art, because not only does it do art, it does architecture and it takes all the disciplines together. I also like the book The Grammar of Ornament, which is the history of ornament. I don't know. I mean, of course, there's novels that I love, poetry I love, but these encyclopedic kind of epic understandings of the world, I think, are never boring, and I reference them often. To see something, well, I'm going to see Cats for the third time tonight. I didn't like it as a musical originally, but invoking Paris is Burning and the culture of today, of the ballroom culture, it's really incredible. And I love the movie Singing in the Rain because my dear friend Betty Comden wrote it. I never thought I'd get to know her, and I got to know the cast. And they were 24 years old, she and Adolf, when they wrote that. So I always look at that as a hopeful thing. And that is the transition of technology. It's about a silent film star who can't make it into talking movies. Yet Debbie Reynolds lip syncs. And so the beauty of that is even though there's a transition in technology, there's beauty in the transition, and another generation gets to inhabit that in talking. So I love that. Next person to talk to. I would talk to Amanda Gordon, the poet laureate. Um, I would like to hear her extemporaneously and not composed, to hear what she sounds like in the natural dialogue. Because sometimes I think the prose can get run away, but given that she's able to create that prose, there must be something behind it that's extraordinary. I'd love to hear her in conversation about how architecture and design affects her.
Lee, every time I see your name on my cell phone and you call for whatever reason, it brings a smile to my face. I always enjoy talking to you, and I want to thank you for taking the time and give us opportunity to not only get to know some of your intellectual point of view, which has been well documented and shared through your writing and your work, but also get to know you a little bit more on a personal level so people can understand the human being, the artist, the entrepreneur, the business owner, the friend, the person who appreciates is committed to this industry far more than many out there. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate having you.
Thank you. And we're not going back.
Now going back. All right. Thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you. Okay, thank
There
you.
we go. We're done.